Hello and welcome to this history tutorial on the Homesteaders. This is for Edexcel GCSE History American West. Today we will cover the problems that the homesteaders faced when trying to farm on the plains and the range of solutions to help them live successfully on the plains. By the 1850s and 1860s, the government was encouraging people to settle on the plains with the opening up of territory in Nebraska and Kansas and the 1862 Homestead Act. However, unlike California and Oregon, where the mild climate and fertile soils were excellent for growing crops, the land on the plains was much more problematic. Homesteading on the plains was a tough life, as they faced a range of problems, particularly those first settlers. If we first think about the problems with the geography and the climate of the plains, the Great Plains had an extreme climate. Summers were exceptionally hot, but the winters were exceptionally cold, so preparing for these seasons was difficult. The Great Plains also did not get that much rain, and there were very few rivers or streams. This meant it was often too dry for most crops to grow, and droughts happened often. Linked to the lack of rainfall, there were very few trees on the plains, as it was too dry for them. This again posed problems for homesteaders, as this meant there was no timber available for building houses or making fences, and no fuel source for a fire. There were several other problems linked to farming itself. Ploughing was extremely difficult, as the soil contained deep tangled roots from the prairie. Normal ploughs that were being used in California and Oregon broke under the strain. Farmers had to resort to digging the grass by hand with spades, or hire a sod buster with a heavy plough and a team of oxen, which was expensive. Crop failure was also a common problem, as the crops they were used to growing elsewhere could not cope with the tough conditions on the plains, as they were too dry and too cold in winter. Add to this the threat of prairie fires in the summer when it was hot, and these ruining entire crops, along with swarms of grasshoppers destroying everything in their path. People reported that the flying grasshoppers blocked out the sun, there were so many. Farming on the plains was much tougher than people might have first anticipated. Life was tough on the homestead, but through the years a range of solutions were found to solve at least some of the problems they had endured. As we have said, the conditions on the plains made farming difficult, but new developments, government initiatives and new crops helped. One of the first new inventions to provide some help to the homesteaders was the development of the wind pump, which increased the supply of water by pumping underground water to the surface. The first self-governing windmill was developed in 1854, but these early examples of windmills had issues. They often could not access water deeper than 30 feet, and they needed constant maintenance. It wasn't until 1870, when the windmills switched to steel blades, that they became more efficient. As we know, wood was in short supply on the plains, so fencing was an issue. The introduction of barbed wire in 1874 meant that farmers could now cheaply fence off their land to keep animals off their crops. This was a great invention for the homesteaders, as barbed wire fencing was much cheaper than buying in timber for fencing. However, barbed wire didn't become more widely used until after 1880, as the earliest types of barbed wire broke easily and often rusted. A final piece of technology that was developed to help the homesteaders farm successfully on the plains was the sulky plough, developed in 1875. These were used to plough up tough weeds and prairie grass on the Great Plains. These were strong and easy to operate and made ploughing much easier. 50,000 sulky ploughs were sold in the first 6 years of production. However, they were often at times unstable. The government also sought to offer a potential solution to the lack of wood on the plains. As we know, the 1862 Homestead Act gave 160 acres of land to each homestead. Although this is a massive amount of land, due to the conditions on the plains, it was not sufficient for successfully farming on the plains. The government therefore introduced the Timber Culture Act of 1873, which allowed homesteaders to claim an additional 160 acres of land, as long as they planted trees on a quarter of it. As we know, these trees were important, as they could act as a windbreak on the plains, but they could also provide settlers with timber for building houses, fences and furniture, as well as fuel. By 1878, 16 million acres of land had been claimed under this act, but unfortunately most of the trees that were planted died because there was not enough water for them. It was only in the state of Minnesota where large increases in tree cover took place. Alongside improvements in technology and government legislation, new crops also supported homesteaders in making farming a success on the plains. It was found that Turkey red wheat, a hardy crop from Russia, in around 1874 was well suited to growing on the plains. People had also learned which crops were most suitable for growing on different types of land. For example, in Nebraska and Kansas, they realised that their land was more suited to growing wheat than corn. Homesteaders also began to look at new farming methods, one of these being dry farming, which was first used in 1879. Dry farming was a technique that prepared the soil so that it trapped rainwater underneath the surface. This particular technique worked well with wheat, and agricultural experts promoted this as the best way for homesteaders to farm the plains. This technique grew in popularity, but a series of droughts in the 1890s stopped it becoming really widespread until the start of the 20th century. In summary, life was hard for those that chose to farm on the plains. Homesteaders faced many problems such as the climate, lack of water, lack of resources, and limited understanding of how to farm an area of this nature. Over the decades, solutions were found for most of the problems with new technology such as the wind pump and barbed wire, from new farming techniques such as dry farming and the introduction of turkey red wheat. Over time, the life of the homestead became easier as people began to understand how to farm effectively on the plains environment.
.outwood.com. See your teacher in school, or check out quiz.outwood.com for those sweet revision quizzes. You can also follow the Outwood Humanities team on Twitter at OGAT Humanities. Until next time, that was a little bit of history.